CNN host Abby Phillip and New York Post correspondent Lydia Moynihan clashed during a panel discussion about immigration and culture. The two were discussing President Trump's recent comments at a rally last week in Pennsylvania. He admitted he used a certain term during a private meeting with lawmakers in 2018. Let's listen.
Why is it we only take people from whole countries, right? Why can't we have some people from Norway, Sweden, just a few? Let us have a few. From Denmark, do you mind sending us a few people? Send us some nice people, do you mind? But we always take people from Somalia, places that are a disaster, right? Filthy, dirty, disgusting, ridden with crime.
Moynihan and Phillip then got into a tense exchange during CNN's Saturday morning Table for Five. Let's watch.
I think we should absolutely select the best of the best. It should be an individual choice. But I think we can also acknowledge there are certain cultures that are not compatible with America.
Which ones?
Well, if we look at Europe, actually, there was a lawyer this week who argued that an Afghan immigrant who raped a woman shouldn't be charged or shouldn't have a penalty because his culture said that women weren't free and equal. We're seeing 77% of rapes in France are from migrants. So there is a real question that people on the right have about certain cultures.
What are the cultures?
Moynihan argued that people from cultures that are okay with certain practices, like, quote, female genital mutilation, shouldn't be let into the country. Phillips then asked Moynihan about the women who would like to flee that sort of thing. Here's more of their exchange.
If you were Somalian, you're a woman and you're fleeing. You're actually trying to leave because you.
The FBI is now arresting people for bringing that with them.
If you want to leave another country, Afghanistan, because you want to be able to read, the United States says you are not allowed in because culturally you're not compatible with this country. How does that make sense?
Well, I mean, look, my grandparents came from Germany and Poland to escape the Holocaust. And before they got here, the whole USS St. Louis was turned away because Jewish culture was determined at that moment as non-compatible.
Yeah, it was interesting discussion. This is obviously in reaction partly to the Minnesota welfare fraud abuse scandal, which was disproportionately perpetrated by Somalians. I find myself getting annoyed by people on both sides of this conversation, basically based on who I heard last, because when I hear someone like Abby Phillip trying to say that there's no differences between culture, just kind of being a little bit the fool here. Like what they're saying is people who come from war-torn Middle Eastern countries, Islamic fundamentalist countries, it's religious extremism. Islamic religious extremism is what Lydia is saying is incompatible with the West, and that's not a racist view or whatever. That's a view of an ideology that I wouldn't want to export a lot of like Christian nationalists either. It's not even religion specific or Hindu radicals or whatever religion. I don't want religious extremism. That's what she's saying. So it's not that crazy to me. But then again, it is also true that we can't, especially when they're here, we can't say, oh, well, we don't like you because we don't like Somalians and you're Somalian, so we got to send you away. We can vet them more properly before they come in. And yes, we do have to be a little selective about which country because we got to make, I think broad categorization makes most sense in immigration policy when you're considering we want more of these people, less of these people. The reason we don't have tons of people coming in from Denmark is that Denmark's a perfectly nice place to live. So all of Denmark doesn't want to come to here. Somalia is more of a failed state and people want to leave it and come here.
I mean, I just think just starting from the top, by what the president said, he named Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Yeah. And I think when you say those
high-income countries.
Okay, but when you name those places and say it, you know that the understanding is that we are assuming a lot of the people there are not people of color. And so when you opposite to that name Somalia and say, oh, use the same word that he used for Haiti, I believe, calling it S-hole, and then that's where people of color live. And it's like, okay, we don't govern our laws.
Low GDP.
But we don't govern our laws based on, so like Lydia's example that, you know, Afghan people may consider rape differently than we do in the U.S. or whatever she said, or they do in Europe, and so lawyers arguing that an Afghan person they're representing and be charged differently. that's irrelevant in the U.S. We consider it how we consider it. So if you migrated here and you do anything egregious like that, first of all, you're getting deported, and second of all, you're going to jail. If you know, like either way, you're getting prosecuted properly through our system.
Check it
but we don't.
I
know, but we don't also assume that everybody that's coming from Afghanistan wants to be under that mindset, but also is operating under anything that they've learned in the past. Sometimes when people are fleeing dire situations, like migrants that I've interviewed that have come here from Venezuela, it's really life or death for them. Even when you look at the numbers of why migrants that flee dire situations commit less crimes based on like per capita, it's because they literally know that they can get thrown out of the country. They know they can go to jail.
And I think we should take as many Venezuelans as we possibly can, which is why I break from the right. There are several different arguments being made against immigration. I think this if there's an actual cultural difference and there's actually higher crime rates, that is a good reason to reject immigrants of that ideology or from that region. That doesn't apply to the Venezuelans, who they're in America. It's part of America. It's part of the American continent. They don't have contradictory values. They're fleeing socialism. We are against socialism. They're Christian. They want to work. I'm for that category of immigration.
And how do you respond to, and I'm not saying that you're siding with Lydia, but when you look at the table conversation, there was a man sitting on the panel that specifically said, yeah, this was the same conversation they had about Jewish people back in the day. They didn't want us here. You are Italian, right? This is the same conversation that they tried to associate all Italians with crime when they didn't want them coming here. But guess what? There are plenty of Italians living in America whose family migrated here that have been great stand-up citizens that have contributed to our society. So just like in the same ways that we shouldn't allow that conversation to stand historically, we shouldn't then start targeting people that shouldn't come because their culture or what you perceive as their culture and how they live by it or don't should be the reasons why they get into America. When most people that come here, even the Somali community, if we're sticking to that recent story, are not abusing our system. It's a small pocket of people in Minnesota. I think when we crunched the numbers, it was like less than 1% of the Somali people that have migrated here have committed a crime. And when you look at how many people during the pandemic committed financial fraud crimes that were American, it's egregiously higher of our own people that have abused the system because they saw an opportunity to do so. So I also think that it's not the right time to tie those two stories together and to make it a time to target that community, as I've been saying, but also then to widen it and to look at what happened in the National Guard incident, like we talked about. That was somebody from Afghanistan that helped the U.S. in many ways, fought alongside the U.S. to right the wrongs, and then maybe went crazy or whatever. We're still looking into that case. But he did something here, so now we look at all Afghanistan people migrating here and say, oh, bad people. And it's like, that's not always the case. He did everything across the board that would allow somebody to get...
Look, I hear you, and I'm pro-immigration for the most part, but I think the difference people on the right will say between, yes, Jewish immigrants, we want them all. Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, Chinese, Taiwanese, Indians who are going to work hard. The difference between all of them and the Somalians is
it's a black country.
Radical
That
Islam.
is the difference.
Radical Islam.
That's the difference.
I think it's
that is
not,
the wildest thing to not
skin.
say.
Not
that is
skin.
the wildest thing to not admit and acknowledge that the president has a history of doing. These are poor countries, and he points out the ones of color, and that's the way he always calls it names. Like even
India is a poor country too, and we're going to take as many. I'm for, and Trump is for, taking as many high-skilled workers from India as possible. So I don't think you can say it's not.
But he's
a race
not
thing,
taking
it's
any
a
of the
creed.
poor people that will come here and work hard and do all the laborious jobs that Americans are not taking. Like you're saying, the president is against that, even though he's used migrants in many of his businesses.
We have plenty of Hispanics for that. We don't bring them from across the ocean.
I think that we should not just be targeting random countries.
Okay, but the difference is the ideology. The difference is radical Islam, which people have a concern about because of attacks of this nature, of what we just saw in Australia, what we saw at the guard shooting, what we see all over the world. The instability in that is not all areas of the world are equally unstable right now. The Middle East, North Africa stand out.
I just
right?
think we need to vet people based on actions and not their ancestry. That's not a good vetting tool for immigration here into the U.S. based on actions.
I think when you're here, absolutely, you can't be judged based on the behaviors of someone like you or from your same country. I agree, but our immigration policy does have to be a little. Would you accept that some kind? I mean, we put limits on how much can come from this country and this country.
I think vetting individuals is important, but I think when you look at whole cultures and paint it with a broad stroke brush, that's how we get into like making an entire culture feel isolated from migrating to this country. And I don't think that's the right way to go.
Coming up on Rising, actor and director Rob Reiner has been found dead alongside his wife. Shocking story. We'll be right back after this.